is everything that communicates, but is not a word. This beautiful theater is communicating to us. How you sit is communicating to us. The things that you attach to yourself, a purse, a pen, a fancy car, all these things are communicating. How you look at others communicates. And all day long, we are communicating non-verbally. All day long. So all day long, we're making choices. We're making choices. They're based on culture. They're based on peer pressure, on personal preferences. And so the things we wear and attach to ourselves are transmitting, our bodies are transmitting information. You were a spy catcher, you use nonverbals every day. What do you use it for? To make sure people are comfortable. To make sure that we are empathetic. The only way to be truly empathetic is by understanding nonverbals. Carl Sagan, the famous cosmologist, said, who are we? What are we? You think about that. It really takes a smart person to ask that question. What are we in this universe? And he summed it up this way, and I think it's rather exquisite. He said, all we are is the sum total of our influence on others. That's all we are. It's not how much you earn. It's not how many cars you have. It's our influence on each other. And what's interesting is that the primary way that we influence each other is through nonverbals. It's that nice handshake. It's a pat on the shoulder. It's that touch of the hand. It is that behavior that communicates love in a way that words simply can't do it. When you leave here, you're going to have choices. You always have choices. You have free agency. And one of the things that you should think about is, how do I change my nonverbals? How do I become that person of influence? Because if there's one thing we need in this world, it's truly to be more empathetic. And so when I see this, it says it all. That's why we use nonverbals, because they're powerful. Thank you.
Behavior I wanted him to use, all that did was make both of us feel uncomfortable. So how can you tell? How can you read people's body language to read your minds? We're going to show you right now. And that means I'm going to bring out our first body language model, James. James represents 75% of the world. You didn't know this about James, but James is a looker. What that means is that James's brain thinks in pictures and images, And here's how we can tell that James is a looker from his body language. First thing, he stands up tall, he has good posture. Second, he's dressed well because appearance is important to lookers. The next thing you'll notice about James is that he holds a little stress in his shoulders. Lift up your shoulders a little bit. Yeah, keeps hold the stress there. Next thing, you'll notice he has wrinkles in his forehead because James looks up when he remembers something he has seen, and he looks up more often than most of us do. The first is that you give him lots of eye contact because he literally believes if you do not look at him, you are not paying attention to him and you are ignoring him. The second thing you do with lookers is you give them words that have a visual component to it. I see what you mean, or look at this, or let's picture working together this way. So you use the type of language that is going on in James's brain. Those are lookers, 75% of people in the world. Our next body language model is Marge. And Marge represents 20% of the people in the world. Marge is a listener. What this means is that Marge's brain thinks in words and sounds. And this is the body language that you will see in a listener. First, Marge, not as well dressed as James because appearance is not as important to her. Sorry, Marge. Next, Marge has a tendency to look down and to the left because that's where you look when you're remembering something you have heard. Next thing you'll notice about Marge is that a lot of times she'll put her head in her hand. It's called telephone posture. Other things you'll notice about Marge is that she has a tendency to mumble to herself. Go ahead, mumble. And it's not that she's crazy, it's that she thinks in words and sounds, so she's really literally talking to herself. Now with that corporate controller. So what you do is that when they're speaking, you look at them and then you look away. And when you're speaking, you look at them and then look away. The second thing you do with listeners is that you use words that are auditory. That sounds good to me. Or let's talk this over. That's the type of language their brain uses, so you're using that to appeal with them. Listeners, 20% of the people in the world. And our final body language model is Marina. And Marina represents 5% of the people in the world. Marina is a toucher. Now what you think? What that means is that Marina's brain thinks in feelings and tactily. And here's the kind of body language you will see in a toucher. First thing, and the biggest tell on touchers is whether or not they've ever met you before in their lives, they are ready to hug you. Rather than style. So if a toucher is coming at you and you don't feel comfortable, stick your hand out. Give these people a point of contact with you. That's what they're looking for. The second thing you do with touchers is you use language that either has a feeling to it or is tactile. So I want to hear how you're feeling about this. Let's get in touch. Reach out and tell me what you think. That's the kind of language that appeals to touchers, people who process information in feelings and tactily. So I'm going to read your mind again, and you're probably thinking, so which one of these three am I? Which allows you to reach the full spectrum of people that you're hanging out with. And And here's the other magic thing. You don't even have to be in somebody's presence to figure out how their brains work. Interested? Right. All you need to do is listen to or look at the words they're using. So if you're in a phone conversation, listen for the words. If you're reading an email, look at the words. People who are lookers will use more visual language. People who are listeners will use more auditory words, and people who are touchers will use more feeling and kinesthetic words. You don't have to be in that same space to know what they are. So here's my challenge to you. Go back and read some of the emails that you have sent. And you will notice, now that you know who you are, the kind of language that you're using. And it'll back that up. It happens with everybody.